You're live.
We're live. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and good evening, and it could be anywhere. Actually, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. My name is Eric. I'm the course facilitator here at Startup School. Pleasure to be joined by Kat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kat Mañalac, a partner at YC.
Kat and I are here today to answer questions about the subjects of this week's lectures, how to talk to users, and how to launch again and again and again. We've pulled a bunch of questions together from the thread on the Startup School forums that we'll start answering, but we will also take some questions from the YouTube comments, from Twitter, smoke signals, basically anywhere that you can find us. We will attempt to answer some questions. So let's jump into it. First question is from Gustavo from Fluxo. Fluxo enables you to build a financial model for your growing company in minutes, not days. So I only have one question, Gustavo, about this one-liner, and it was, who is this for? Is this for startup founders? Is it for small businesses? So I would just add, like, in the one-liner is pretty good, but just add who it's for. Your question was, there are so many channels we can launch on, but many of these I can either do something quick and hit launch, or I can spend days and weeks trying to maximize the chance that each channel is successful. What's your recommendation for balancing between maximizing number of launches versus maximizing chance of success of each launch?
So one of my main goals for the talk was to sort of stop founders from putting too much emphasis on that one perfect launch. So I would say you shouldn't be spending weeks trying to perfect any of these channels. So what I would recommend is, you might spend a few hours trying to get the messaging for each of these channels down. You might spend a couple hours to a couple days getting feedback on that messaging, but don't sort of spend weeks stressing over each of these channels. Granted, launching a kind of pre-order Kickstarter campaign or pitching press does take a little longer, and I'm sure Eric has some thoughts on Kickstarter and pre-orders, but don't spend too much time stressing over any of these channels.
Yeah, a launch, one of the things that I've learned is that, think about it this way. Everyone in the world doesn't know who you are right now. Every time you launch, 0.00001% of the world finds out about it. So every single launch will be brand new to so many people that's kind of the motivation to keep launching, and it's kind of like an MVP. Like if it's perfect by the time you launch, then you've waited too long. Yeah,
you want to maximize your surface area, and it's so hard to get people to care about you at this stage in your company's life that you want more and more of those chances.
To get feedback, yeah. Next up, Matthew from Katara writes, Katara, we help you find bias in your AI training data sets and then help eliminate it. My question is for Kat. How long is too long for a landing page call to actions, like sign up to be notified of our alpha launch or get on our mailing list to be the first users on our platform? Is there a general rule of thumb on how long people would wait or stay interested?
So the longer you have people on a wait list, the harder it is to re-engage them. So I would say get an MVP of the product out as soon as you can. And
I think the question was also like how
long should people?
Yeah, like how long the call to action.
How long should the actual call to action be? As short as possible.
Yes.
Like users don't care, like alpha, beta doesn't mean anything to me as a user. So just say like sign up to be notified of our launch, sign up for our newsletter, whatever it is, short.
I think oftentimes like when I'm writing content or copy for a site, I sometimes get a little bit too caught up in my own head. One thing to consider is like you're the one who's been thinking about this for ages, like for hours and weeks and days. So it's possible that you may just need to get whatever you've written in front of anybody and just ask them what they think and get their opinion on it. Because oftentimes, like, we will obsess over the perfect copy when in reality, like, they still don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, try to get as much feedback as you can as possible. And
Startup School is like a great place. So you can post your content on the Startup School forum, and just like if you need some eyeballs that aren't your own, just like post a thread, say, hey, can I get some feedback on this? I'm sure that some people will jump in and say, like, I don't get it.
And try to be, if you see something on the Startup School forum that you don't understand, jump in there, and because you need to hear those honest voices.
Constructive,
yeah.
Constructive feedback. Okay, Daniel at Storylow. Storylow is launched. We help brands hire photographers for their digital marketing needs. Brands. Okay, yeah, I get that. We have a round of user interviews scheduled next week. We are also heavily engaged in paid customer acquisition through an incentive program. While we are talking to a user, should we pitch them on a new coupon incentive or just ask for feedback? Is it better not to mix up these two user touch points? Yes, I have some great advice for this. I like to separate my user interviews into two different groups. One is with people who are using the product, and one is with people who are not users, who I just want to learn about how they, what problem they have on the day-to-day and what existing solutions they're already using. Once they start using the product, generally I find that people just want to talk about how to improve it and give you feedback, and it's really difficult to get them to context switch back to a world before they started using your solution. So in your case, I would say separate, like if you have user interviews with people who haven't begun using your product, try to treat those as kind of wide open interviews where you're asking questions to find out, what other products do they use? Have they paid money for similar products in the past? How those products failed? Before you introduce your product and start getting feedback on that. And then in terms of like coupons, incentives, I always try to just ask for I try to ask for feedback without any incentive, because honestly, if this is a real problem that people have on a regular basis, then you're helping them by you like asking them about their problem and trying to build something as a solution. Like that already should be the incentive that they have, if this is truly a big problem for it. If you're finding that you're constantly having to pay money to people to answer surveys and stuff like that, it's possible that they don't really have a burning problem.
And one thing I would think about too is what you're building really better than what's currently already out on the market? Because that might be a challenge too, is converting people who already use similar services. So yeah, as Eric was saying, if it's not a real problem that you're solving, or if your product isn't 10x better than what they were using, it might be difficult to convince people to.
Yeah, like that's a good data point as you consider which ideas to work on. Next up, we are Ladder, a platform that simplifies the process of finding effective mental wellness practices and solutions. Okay, so a few problems with this one. Like I can't tell if it's an app, if it's a website, if it's a service. The platform doesn't really tell me. I think I get like something to do with mental practices. I don't even know what a mental.
I think it would be also it's missing like who is this for exactly? Like is it for is it just for consumers? Is it for are you directly connecting consumers with therapists or?
Let's assume. Okay, I'm going to assume that it's.
So who is it for,
like
and
consumers.
what is the exact problem you're solving?
Okay.
Yeah.
Their question is. What are effective strategies for getting influencers, bloggers, and leaders to help us launch, preferably as cheap as possible, if not free? Good question. How do you get people to talk about your product?
It is really tough. I think one of the things to think through is do your research. Are you when you reach out to bloggers or influencers, are you actually solving a problem that they care about or that their readers care about? I would say that and frankly, it's a numbers game. So for a lot of the YC companies that I've worked with that have tried to get influencers and bloggers to cover them, they will reach out. If you're doing cold reach out and not getting warm introductions, you can reach out to 50 bloggers and only get one person to respond.
So it's like quantity.
It's quantity. So do a little bit of research, know who you're targeting, but also just keep reaching out. So if you're, if you need more than one person to respond, you're going to have to send hundreds of these emails. And often people say, "Oh, we tried to reach 10 or 20 or 30." It's not enough. So this is a numbers game. And
also, one of the things is to aim lower.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people who want to help. Like basically, the people that have this problem that you're trying to solve, they exist everywhere on the internet. Some are these like top-level influencers. Others are people who run like a Facebook group. We've seen a lot of companies get their first users and people talking about their product by finding like a Facebook group. There's a company 2 batches ago that made a device that helped kids with cerebral palsy learn how to walk. They basically just went on Facebook, found a group of parents and families whose children have cerebral palsy, and got dozens, if not hundreds, of signups just through that group. So there's subreddits, there's like Twitter hashtags, there's Facebook groups. What are some of the?
There's Product Hunt, there's Hacker News, and if you're reaching out to bloggers and you're emailing, don't think that they're going to respond after the first email. It's just like sales. You have to follow up with a follow-up email. There was a company that I mentioned in the talk called Joy. They were trying to get featured by, they're a wedding website builder, and they were trying to get featured by wedding websites and blogs. So they said out of 50, only one responded, and they had a whole sort of like drip campaign to follow up with those bloggers.
That's a good.
So definitely follow up.
How are we doing on the tech thing? Still streaming?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think our internet is.
Oh yeah, forgot that the internet here is not perfect.
Yeah, it's dropping out. I think we should go with an Ethernet cable.
Okay.
I don't know if there's one local. It says excellent connection, but it's dropping the video feed. But we're good now.
Okay, we're good now.
We're good now.
We're live. We're still live. Okay.
Audio is always working.
Cool.
You've gotten in now a little.
You can hear us. Okay, next question. I'm the founder of Porch Ship. We provide an affordable pickup for any shopping returns directly from your porch.
That's pretty clear.
It's clear. A little bit of a tongue twister with a lot of mentions of porch. Okay, I'm launching in Pittsburgh this week. What can you advise for launching in a specific metro area? In my case, Pittsburgh. I've been to Pittsburgh once.
Yeah.
I don't know if my Pittsburgh area knowledge is perfect. Okay. So launching in an area with like a geo-targeted service. I guess you must have runners that go and pick up these porches or something like that.
I mean, one story that I love is Lug. When Lug is Uber for movers, or they basically will, deliver. They'll come up and pick up anything. They'll pick up any like delivery item. So what they did on their first week, just to figure out, just to start getting people using it, is they stood outside of IKEA. They actually had, one of the founders was driving a truck, and one of the founders would run up to people in the line at IKEA and say,
their stuff?
"Yeah, hey, do you need help moving this, getting this home?" And they would have, their, user like click a button, and then the other founder would drive the truck up. And so I think in the very beginnings, you're going to have to do some manual stuff, on the ground stuff like this.
I've got some ideas for this one. So like presumably you might have gone to school, you might have worked at companies in the area. Why don't you get all of your past coworkers, your friends, your colleagues, other classmates using this? Like, it's kind of a universal problem. Like, people who buy stuff on Amazon need to return it. I'm sure that you can just talk to your friends and see if they have the problem. Other alternatives are, we've seen companies have some success with door hangers, where they just go to Kinko's, print off. Are there still Kinko's? No.
I think so.
It's like FedEx.
There are.
Okay, so they go and they print off little door hanger things, and they go around to houses and just hang them on doors. It's kind of top of mind. I could imagine, like, what if you printed off stickers and you as you saw Amazon then people would think that you're trying to steal the Amazon boxes. I was like thinking you could put stickers on other people's Amazon boxes on their porches.
One thing that worked for me is I recently started using a startup because they put something up in my building's elevator. So they said, hey, if you want, to have these types of things delivered.
Idea.
Yeah, and then so I took down the number.
It's just like wherever there's a higher concentration of people.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
Right.
Like did you rip off a little tag, or was it like a website?
I didn't, I just took a photo.
I guess we do have phones now. Okay, next one. From Shishe, founder of YDS Medicine, which provides self-driving molecular design services, serving as a GPS for the journey of drug discovery. Okay, I work with a lot of bio companies. Bio founders have amazingly interesting products and ideas. They generally have to dumb it down for the rest of us. So this might be...
This one needs a little workshopping.
Yeah, okay. The question is, how or where to launch biotech or pharma tech companies?
In terms of press and media-wise, we found that Fierce Biotech and Stat are great, and they are often interested in early-stage bio and life sciences. What I do is I, look at what reporters have covered companies like mine, or like the company I'm going to pitch before. It is what I'm building in the wheelhouse of things that they're interested in, and then I make sort of like a list of who I might reach out to, and I prioritize the first. And I, say I'm going to Fierce Biotech, I'd find the right reporter there. I'd reach out, offer them an exclusive on the fact that we've launched, and then, go down the list from there. If they don't respond or pass, then go to the next, reporter or publication.
I think that I always love launching when I have some reason to launch, like some sort of event. So oftentimes, scientists are going to conferences, they're publishing papers, they're publishing posters, which are a thing. So if you're doing that, try to consider reaching out to reporters or bloggers or people who are in this space and pitching them your idea timed around that conference. It's a good reason to say like, hey, pay attention to me, there's something happening like this week.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think especially if you're, from the life sciences, you might be publishing a paper, and oftentimes, the university you might be publishing that with will help reach out to reporters as well.
Universities sometimes have groups that
Yes.
are specialize in trying to get the work of students and researchers out. So that can be another person who can help.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Next up, we are Robin Rover, an online platform for people to trade their purchasing data directly with companies. Okay, I think I know what you do, but I'm guessing there's something a little bit missing, like purchasing data like my Amazon shopping history. Okay, so this is like one of those companies that is trying to change it from ad, like monetizing based on ads to like a clear, transparent.
Giving consumers control of their data.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Regarding the mom test, you say to talk about specifics, not hypotheticals. I need to test which functionalities to develop to evolve our current MVP. To do so, I've gathered some insights from users on what they would like to do. I want to test them with others, but should I ask hypothetical future features? How would you recommend to test them? Okay, so I always like to, when I'm testing an MVP with users, I always like to build something, whatever is the actual MVP, like the smallest set of work that I have to do in order to solve their problem, and then put it in their hands and get feedback. Talking about a hypothetical product is hard. Talking about a hypothetical product is hard. It's much easier to talk about a problem that they're having and then build a solution. Give them the solution to the problem they told you they actually have, and then validate your hypothesis. Do they actually have this problem? Sometimes people will talk about a problem that they think they have or that they wish they had, Anyways, so as you're gathering these insights, try to gather the insights about the problem that people have, and then in the back of your mind, think about how you could solve them, and then give people the solution so you can try it. Okay. Next one. OCAQ.
OKAQ.
OKAQ.com. Teach kids AI using video games. Cool. Does it make sense to save the hard launch, the full version 1.0 public release, for a big event such as Demo Day?
If you were going through YC, we would say no, don't save that big launch for Demo Day. Launch as quickly as you can so that by Demo Day you have some amount of traction, or you've been able to get real user feedback and iterate the product based on what your actual users are saying.
Yeah, I think just hearing some of the words that you're using about this, saying hard launch, full version, 1.0 public release, I think you may already be kind of getting too complicated with this. In reality, what you're making sounds interesting, like a game that helps kids learn AI. Just get that out there. I'm sure that either you have kids yourself or some people who have kids. Don't treat your launch as it has to be perfect.
The sacred thing.
Yeah, just push the button, make it go live, make the website live, and tell your friends. That's 1.0. That's a public launch, and that's something like Kat was saying. That's what the first point on which you can iterate afterwards. Like I said before at the beginning, every time you launch, there will be a megatude? No, that's not a word. Just a multitude of people who've never heard what your app is, so they'll be happy to find out about it then. So yeah, don't overthink things. Okay, Blake from Live Simulator. Live Simulator is VR training for first responders. Cool, got it. I let users run the call by placing them in VR and having them command virtual crews to resolve an emergency, communicate using an in-game radio, and try not to get anyone virtually killed. It's created by a firefighter for firefighters. Oh, this is all the one-liner. Okay. It's a long one-liner. I think your one-liner, VR training for first responders, already does great. Question. I've built 3 modules over the years, but the 2 failed launches convinced me that the bar is much higher for my MVP. Does YC have good examples of solo founders who've built very big projects while working full-time? I mean, we probably do have some great examples.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly have founders who built their MVP while working full-time.
Yes.
But I think after the MVP, that was enough to convince most of them that they needed to go full-time to really build it into a big company.
I agree. I think working a full-time job and splitting it is a good way to get started. And really, the first test that you want to run if you're working at a big company and you're working on an idea is, do you even care about this idea? You're the first person that you have to convince. If you're not convinced that this is going to be exciting and interesting, there's no way you're going to convince other people. So get yourself convinced. And it's possible that while you're working part-time on this, you'll be convinced that at least there's a problem. So while you may have discovered that your MVP doesn't solve that problem yet, I hope that over the 2 years or over the time that you've been working on it, you've kind of talked to enough firefighters and I guess leaders like the captains and that kind of thing, to figure out if people actually have this problem. In terms of maybe to add, I guess we'd have to have a bit more information to understand why you think the launches have failed. But I guess no one is constantly using your MVP. That's tough. I would say that if you find that if your MVP is designed to be used regularly and people aren't using it regularly, then that's a good sign that you don't have the features yet or you're not solving the specific problem that they have. Question from Kyle at Phase. We're Phase, a white label payments SDK that enables our enterprise partners to issue digital rewards in exchange for the end user's value that's stored on their platforms. Okay, I kind of got lost halfway through.
Yeah.
A white label payments SDK. It's like Stripe, okay?
Digital rewards, which I'm not sure what those are, in exchange for end user value, which also is vague.
I'm a bit lost. We'll have to get back to Kyle about this. But the question that Kyle asks is, once our white label payments SDK is integrated, we only get paid when the enterprise partners from end users of our service. We pay X dollars per transaction, and our enterprise partners upsell our services to their end users. In this flow of funds, it doesn't enable us to A/B test different pricing for end users. How do we start thinking about experiments around pricing? So there's a lot of content that YC has published around pricing. I always love pricing for enterprise partners because you kind of don't have to publish it on your website. You can have one price for one customer, one price for a different customer, and they probably will never find out about it. So especially in the early days, you actually can run a lot of A/B testing just by not having kind of a public version of your pricing. Have you seen anyone else do any interesting kind of enterprise?
No, I think that's right. And one thing that I know surprises a lot of founders who are building enterprise companies for the first time is that you were probably charging too little. That's the most common thing I've seen, is that you're not asking for enough.
I mean, one way to think about it is for any enterprise software, if you're building something that solves a problem that the enterprise has, the alternative is probably them using their own engineering team to build a solution to the problem. That's upfront engineering time and labor, and then the maintenance cost of having to maintain that software over time. For any engineer to pick up a pen or whatever engineers use to do things these days, it's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So yeah, to Kat's point,
don't be afraid to ask for more.
Yeah.
They'll push back if
Yeah, again, if they really truly have this burning problem, they may say no to the price, but they still want it, and there will be a price at which they'll pay the trade-off. Okay, Zaire at Umlauf. We're Umlauf. We help users to separate most of their inorganic trash by scanning the barcode of empty packages. Okay, I think it could help with whether it's for companies or businesses or people's homes. When your user is different than the paying customer, how do you optimize between the priorities of your users and the ones of your customers? Great question. This happens a lot. Less often on the consumer side and more often on the B2B enterprise side, where the buyer might be the founder or the manager and the user might be someone else. So this is a really good example of having needing to do a variety of user interviews. I generally will start attacking a problem that has the same person be the user and the payer. But if that's the case that they're split, you generally have to figure out how the flow of money works. Like, who's the person who decides whether to pay to solve this problem? Who manages the budget? I talked about this a little bit in my video. One of the important questions that you need to resolve during user interviews is, are they already paying for a solution to this problem, or do they already have the budget to pay for a solution to this problem? If they don't pay or they don't have a budget, it's possible that they might not be the best first users for your product. We're selling our services to municipal governments. Oh, gosh, I should have just read ahead. Is there any hack that accelerates their decision-making to pilot test your product? No.
it's
Municipal
a
governments are
slow process.
extremely tough.
Yeah.
I guess some things that you can consider doing are find out when the budgeting process starts. Understand if they actually have budget in their if they have line items in the budget to solve this, because it's kind of a non-starter if they don't. That would be like 6 to 12 months of getting back on their radar. Okay, I'm going to read the whole question now instead of try to answer it halfway through. Okay, Mander at Contact Pointers. Contact Pointers is a service for automatically updating other people's address books when you change your contact information and letting you manage what info they get. We are hoping, okay, I'm going to pause there. That idea I have heard before.
Yeah.
We have funded before.
Yeah,
That
we
is
definitely have.
I think like Bump going all the way back in the day.
It's something that everyone wants.
It is a problem. So here's one of those tricks. Like, it is a problem that everyone has. It's not necessarily a problem that people are willing to pay money for.
Right.
There are a lot of dead bodies in the past. I would recommend going to look at them and seeing
what happened to them.
Try to do a deep dive there. Okay, we're hoping to do a friends family launch in the next few days, and we're wondering about what our feature targets should be for an online launch. Because of the nature of our service, it has a strong network effect, but we have features planned to make it useful in sharing contact information with people who don't have the service. My question is, how vital do you think the quality of these features is to an online launch? I'm worried about potential early adopters deciding it is not useful because there isn't a large network, and then it being harder to get them back when we've launched later. Is this a legitimate worry? No, I don't think so, because there are a lot of people in the world. And so if you find that the first few users try it and they don't like it, they leave and they don't come back, not the end of the world, because your product, from what we can tell, is designed for a lot of people. If there were only 100 people in the world who might use this, and I talked to a product yesterday who is making something for sailing coaches, there are probably only 1,000 people in the world. So if you piss off 100 of them, that's not a good thing. But in your case, you should not be worried about this, especially your friends and family. They will use it as many times as you tell them to use it. So
yeah, you can launch again once you have an improved product. If
you can launch to the same people.
Yeah,
I've launched to the same people over and over again, and they, if anything, as it gets better, they'll be like, "Wow, this is way better than last time." The problem that I could see a little bit with yours is it sounds like it has a network effect where it needs to have a network effect. I would try to build it so it doesn't need a network effect, so just when you use it by yourself, it's more useful. Hi. That's okay. Sunny from Sterniday Industries. We tell our bank that we make silicon-encased antennas for responsive sensor frameworks, but what we actually make is AI sex toys. That doubles the length. Sex toys that double the length of a woman's orgasm. I have a question for Kat about relaunch narratives. Long story short, also, that's hilarious. Long story short, I successfully launched the sex toy 5 years ago as CMO. After initially going viral, a dispute that led me to leave and the company to pivot into medical devices, and then being asked to return to refocus the business to our original idea recently. Here's my question. If you were a potential investor looking at a rebirth company like this, what kind of indicators would you be looking for to prove that a team can continue to make new moments in the spotlight happen?
This is a complicated question.
Okay, but
Yeah.
let's elucidate the question.
Yeah.
So he or she left and came back. Now they're relaunching this company and trying to look for investors.
Yeah, they started out as a sex toy, pivoted into medical devices,
Pivoting back.
And I think I'd want to understand like what you and the rest of the team, what convinced you that this was.
What have you learned?
What have you learned? Like what have you learned from all of that has just happened?
Anyone who works on something for 5 years has
Yeah.
learned a tremendous amount about the industry and the problems that people have. So you should hopefully know a lot about what.
Have some major insight there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what.
And then also have you. I don't know whether you'd raised a ton of money and burned through all of it, and now, or whether this is the first time you're raising.
Yeah.
Because that can make things complicated. But yeah, I think the main thing is that clearly your team has expertise in this space, and that's exciting. But yes, what is it that you've learned, and what do you know that others don't?
Yeah. Good luck. That'll be a fun ride.
Yeah.
I'm Rashmi, founder of Eventus Media, publisher of The Bridge magazine. It's a digital magazine aimed to make news, finance, and career-related information relevant, engaging, and useful to young adults aged 13 to 18. A little bit long in terms of one-liner, but I get it. This is a subscription-based service. My users are the kids, and the customers are the parents who pay for the subscription. I'm currently in the process of customer discovery. My research reveals that the kids are not looking to actively solve the problem, but the parents are. I've been asking questions similar to that in the video, but I feel like I'm missing an angle. I'd appreciate your take. Okay, so in general, I think your users and customers are kind of both the parent. Like, if you're like these topics sound pretty like long-term focused on kind of the like what happens after the kid grows up. I mean, I'm not a 13 to 18-year-old, but unless you're
a super ambitious 13 to 18-year-old, maybe.
So actually, maybe that's kind of the point. If you specifically are trying to like talk to those users, maybe focus your product down even more to make it like just for like IB international baccalaureate students, or just for like Model UN students or something like choose a very specific niche, like a very tiny niche, because then you won't have to have different users and different customers. They'll all be the same person, which is generally easier because, and maybe price it accordingly. If someone's spending their allowance on it, it might be different than if they were like thinking about how much better this is going to be for their kids' education, get them into Harvard and all that kind of stuff. So think about your audience and maybe play with the positioning of your product. Interesting. Next up, Alexander at InstaSense. InstaSense is one-click microdonations to support digital content. Cool. My initial hunch was to validate the idea by talking to content creators who we thought would love to unlock new sources of revenue. However, most of them aren't engaging. If I had a prototype, it would be easier to show exactly how it worked. Okay, I'm just going to stop there. There are many solutions to this problem. So the first thing that I would do is kind of the same as the answer to the other question. I would look at who has tried to do this in the past and figure out what are the problems. And as you're talking to content creators, I would only talk to content creators who've experimented with the other solutions. Because if they haven't experimented with any solution in this space, they probably don't care.
Yeah, and I would really focus on like how what you're building is better than stuff like Patreon or things other.
Gumdrop.
Yeah, a lot of things in this space.
Yeah, there's a multitude of these.
But yeah, if you're technical and it's going to be fast to build a quick MVP, I think that's always.
I talked about this a little bit in the last week. But one thing that you can actually do is you can take an existing solution that's already on the market and like kind of hack it or white label it and make it yours so that you can experiment very quickly by like taking something that's already built, so you don't have to build an MVP. Bruno from WeBoard. WeBoard matches ambitious CEOs with curated executives and founders into ad hoc advisory boards to help them collectively make better decisions. Sounds useful for startup school companies. Hopefully you've posted that on the forums. My question is, when you are exploring different user niches, do you prioritize the users that you talk to? Do we go to several of them at the same time and then zoom in where you feel it's more relevant, or do you go after one group after another? I personally like to do things more in a sequential path. I do it kind of like this. I sit down and I whiteboard out all the potential users groups that I could talk to, and then make a guess as to which ones I think are going to be most valuable, kind of based on those three overlapping Venn diagrams I talked about in the video. Which ones have the most acute problem, who have the most frequent problems, and who are more likely to spend money to solve those problems. I take a guess of like which groups of users will be the best, and then I go and start talking to them. If they don't prove to be good, I'll move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Cool. Next, Yoder from SS Spot. We connect drivers in Latin America who are looking for a public parking lot with public and private parking lot owners. Cool. It's an app that helps you find parking spots in Latin America. I have a question related to user interviews. We've launched our prototype 6 months ago, and we have 15% month-over-month growth.
That's great.
Congrats. That's very impressive. Now we're looking for product market fit. Is it okay if I make the interview with users who are discovering the product, or we have to make it with our active users? We're testing the feature parking bookings in sports games and concerts. Kind of touched on this for another question, but generally I try to segment these user interviews into two different groups, one with people who I've never talked to, who aren't using the product, and one with people who are using the product. The questions are slightly different for each of those two groups. But I'll kind of like, it sounds like you're on the right path towards product market fit. Like that growth is indicating that there is a problem. Hopefully that's revenue. Yeah, I think that's revenue growth. If you're testing a feature, I would recommend testing it with your current users. But it sounds like this might be like a new group of users, like parking for sports games and concerts. How do you think you'd find users for that?
Reaching a new audience from.
Yeah, so I would definitely try. I would definitely also try to talk to new users, because I could imagine that people who are using your app to like park for work aren't the same people who are going to games every week or something like that. Okay, moving into Twitter. Okay, John Doherty asks, what's the fastest way to identify the beachhead when you have paying customers for a mix of industries or sectors? Kind of again to that last question, like you probably, like if you're building a product, either hopefully you are a user in the past, like you're building this to solve your own problem, then you should have a pretty good idea of who the potential users are, because they should look a lot like you. If you're building a product for an industry that you're not already a user of, then kind of do what I just said, where you like generate a list of kind of hypotheses.
And looking through who are your most active users, or who, or who's the easiest sale. Like then you're actually solving a big problem for these people. They're willing to pay, and maybe it's worth, exploring that particular sector.
Oh, they have paying customers. Yeah, totally. Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, so if you already have those users, talk to them. Like within those users, there's probably larger demographics, and you can like double click and say, if there's 2 users in this one group, maybe we can find 100 other users that are in a similar space. Let's see. Okay. We are Sysforce, the most reliable freelance platform for tech companies that replaces outsourcing agencies. How do we approach Silicon Valley tech companies if we are a no-name European company?
Product Hunt, Hacker News as first sort of communities that I highly recommend. I think those hit a lot of the people at the companies that you want to sell to, and those are, if you haven't done those yet, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, Product Hunt especially. With yours, I think it's possible that there are a variety of different platforms already that people use. So like to double click on what Kat said, you really got to differentiate, like why are you better than Upwork, TopTal, and all these other other ones. Okay. Sandro Franco asks, what is the downside of referencing a product or business that already exists? For instance, our company is IDEO, an interactive TikTok, Instagram for language learning?
So a lot of people ask me, should we use the X for Y construction, which is like Uber for X or Airbnb for X? And I think sometimes the answer is you should use that construction if it's the fastest way to paint a picture in someone's head of what you're building. So, for example, if, TikTok, Instagram, like the X has to be a well-known household name. It can't be something that only a few people have heard of. And then it has to be fairly clear why would be interested in X. So an interactive TikTok or Instagram for language learning, that paints a pretty fast,
It's a good picture. I have more questions.
I have questions. Yeah.
So it's a good, like, the best one-liners always generate questions. Like, it makes me interested to want to learn more, and I have questions about what you do. So that's a good start. I would definitely use that. When wouldn't you want to reference the product? So when it's...
Oh, I've seen a lot of people describe themselves as like, we work for X.
Yeah, when it's like literally
If there's a company that's in crisis, you don't want to... Like, WeWork is something you might not want to describe yourself as right now.
Are you an executive that flies around the world on those planes?
I saw a lot of WeWorks for X in actually applying to this batch of YC, and so I thought about that hard. I was like, wow, I personally wouldn't use that. I wouldn't use it if the X is something niche. An alum once called themselves Buffer for Snapchat, which, like, I don't think enough people know what Buffer is to make that make sense. At that point, just describe the problem you're solving, or what you're building and who you're building for.
Or if it's very tangential. Kelly Veronina asks, would a simple site like our example Magic, where it was just like a single page landing page, be a sufficient MVP to begin raising money, or does the MVP need to show extensive working features? Magic, I think, raised a lot of money on the back of that MVP.
Yes.
So the answer is it depends. If the MVP actually solves a problem that people have, then by all means, like literally a web page that says, hi, my name's Eric, here's my phone number, I will solve your problem if you have this, is a great MVP. Like we have founders in this batch of YC where that literally is their whole product. Like their product is they have their brain can solve this problem for you, and other people have this problem, like talk to that person and solve that problem. So absolutely, like if you can solve someone's problem, then put it up on a web page, put it out there, start solving people's problems.
Frankly, that's all they needed to get. They had tens of thousands of people sign up for their wait list. So that's all Magic needed, but of course not all companies are going to have it that easy, essentially.
Okay, should I answer the smartwatch question?
Yes.
Okay. We are Inspirit. We're a smartwatch company. Our main feature is real-time hydration monitoring sensor on a watch. Our sensor is up and running. The development of other parts is not. Organic growth by revenue by selling one piece at a time will take forever. Okay, this is a common mistake that people make. Organic revenue by selling is the only way that your company can be successful, and it starts with one. You make one product, you sell it to one person, and they're happy. Then you sell two, then you sell four, then you sell eight, then it grows. So oftentimes, like, people get way too like ahead of themselves where they think, oh, success is only if I sell 1,000 of something. When in reality, like, you absolutely have to make one of them and get someone to use it, and they have to love it. And if you can't do that, then it's probably not worth working on. People in hardware always think like that's not the way to do it, but that actually is the way to do it. So ideally, if you can use, so your problem is that you've made the sensor but not the smartwatch, why not try attaching your sensor to someone else's smartwatch? Some other smartwatches have Bluetooth interfaces. Just add it on to the strap. Like, there's a lot of ways that you can hack this together without building it. Good luck. Here's one. Nagashri from Turi asks, we connect global shoppers to international travelers. My launch is delayed for 4 months, and there's a huge drop in the users. How do I get them back?
I think there are a lot of ways to re-engage customers and users, whether that's reaching out. I mean, I think if there are just a few, you can reach out and call or try to contact every single one of them and get on the phone with them. You can send emails. I think there are there are a lot of ways that and depends on what, would love to hear sort of what you've tried already.
Yeah, one thing I like to do is to reach out personally as the CEO.
Yes.
Like YC is all about doing things that don't scale, and this is one thing that you can do as the founder. Like think about it this way. No big company in the world, the CEO is not individually emailing people to ask them to use the product. Like I'm talking a real email from your Gmail account, not some drip email campaign. That oftentimes is enough, like not for everybody, but to re-engage some people. Adwait asks, we use methods like surveys to determine product market fit in place of spending a lot of money to build the product. And then we realized we need to pivot or change features. Oh, question. That's fine. Okay, that sounds like a good idea. It's really good. Again, like as we were saying before for that other question, like not building an MVP is sometimes it's sometimes an okay method for determining if people have the problem or not. If they have the problem, then by all means go and create the MVP and get it out there. Let's look for a good one. Here's one. We're Metro Push. We're building a push notifications app for public service providers, electricity, water, who have a bad reputation for keeping their users informed. How do we avoid being perceived as a failure before even getting the chance to serve our users? I think that this is one of those things that you can do even before you become even before you sell to one of these public service providers. Like this is something that you can run just by yourselves. Like you can be the alert function for regular users of these public services. That's how you could earn a good reputation. Like imagine if you started a Twitter account that would talk about the public state of the utilities in your city. People would begin to rely on that and you'd become like a trusted name into place. Then you would go to the public services and say, we've already built this trusted service. Like you need to give us the good data so that we can like continue providing this at an even higher level.
I like that.
Users. Okay.
Exchange.
Here's one. Jamel from Nukes Vision asks, Nukes Vision is the Google Analytics for retail stores. My question is, we're having difficulties to find our first users since we're targeting big live retailers like Walmart. Are we too small for them to consider us? How do we approach big companies with this type of an innovative product? It's tough. Oftentimes at YC, we have companies that want to immediately go after big companies like Walmart. We call this whale hunting because one big contract could result in hundreds or millions of dollars. So honestly, the best strategy here is to not go whale hunting at the beginning. Hopefully your product is useful for other customers as well as kind of big retail stores. So I would try to go after customers who have the problem, but are also like small enough where you could get immediately to someone who could make a buying decision after you show them a demo or after you integrate it into your product. You really want to get a paying customer who's giving you feedback fast, and going to big companies is just a recipe for multi-months.
The reality is, unless you have some connection to Walmart already, it's unlikely that they're going to be your first customer.
Cool. Michael from Biz asks, we're busy. We're busy too. We're busy. We show people's businesses around them and help those businesses receive payments. Question is it okay to stop, rebuild, and relaunch if I'm not exactly pivoting? So honestly, when I hear questions like this from founders, I usually wonder, have they discovered something about their business that says that it's not going to work? That's kind of okay. Like oftentimes as we're talking to early customers, we have this hypothesis about what we think the product or the market's going to be. And after a month or two of talking to customers, we realize that no one actually has this problem, or the problem isn't as painful as we thought it would be. And at that point, like,
Yeah, it's fine.
you have to consider other options, because, like, I don't know who said the quote, but if you keep the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and thinking that it's going to work. So yeah, like, people can pivot, people can change, but you can you also have permission to say, like, what I'm working on is just not the right thing. And I don't know if that's the case for yours. I might be extrapolating too much, but it's possible that you may have actually learned about a better problem in the course of you doing user interviews over the last couple of months. You may have discovered that there's better things. There's a better problem that your users have to solve. Okay, let's get back here. Here's one. I run Gifted app. Gifted is a platform for users to manage their wish lists from multiple sites to shop on and shop for gifts for friends. I'm seeing a lot of traction from high schoolers who use it to share things they love, but the audience won't spend a lot of money, which in turn isn't adding a lot of revenue. Should I keep doubling down on that demographic anyways? I think you answered your own question. Mm-hmm. If your users are using it but aren't actually spending a lot of money, probably don't sound like the people that you should be going after. Either change the product so that it's something that high schoolers can use, but then there's also a way to generate revenue from, or maybe that's not the right demographic to work on. Okay. Christina from listle.io asks, isn't that a YC?
Yeah, it is. An alumni.
Yeah. One question that I feel we're still trying to figure out in user interviews is focusing on what features they want when the scope of the interview is understanding the behavior rather than what we can build. Again, that's an incredibly important kind of thing to consider as you're doing user interviews. I love to consider user interviews as 15 minutes of time where I don't talk and the users just tell me what their life is like. Because oftentimes, everyone has different lives, and we're in our own heads pretty often thinking about what we do on a regular basis and how we would use the product if we were using it. What you really need to do with these user interviews is just let kind of the user's whole life flow over you. Where do they live? What do they do for a living? How do they? How often do they have this problem? You just got to get all that context. I treat those as kind of wide open user interviews.
So if they keep trying to pitch you solutions, you should try to refocus.
Yeah, ask them why they're asking for that solution.
Yeah.
Try to understand under the ask, what's driving them to have that problem. And then you can definitely guide the conversation towards kind of problems that they have and solutions they think would be good for that problem. And then you build it and then you give it back to them. Here's a question. Elliot from Unify asks, how would you recommend successfully launching a big update for a mobile app? We're planning a large update that hopefully will convert more free users to paying users. I
think you go through the entire launch process again. You launch in all those channels, and so you'll do product hunt. You can do Unify 2.0. You'll do Hacker News. I always recommend companies do a blog post on their own as well, and they write about the update and what it means for their users and why they built it this way. But I would say go through, treat it like it's your first launch and hit all the same channels that you would have hit the first time around. Do you have anything to add to that?
I would test your update with existing users and treat some early launches as a beta launch, where if you test it with 100 or 1,000 free users and if they're not upgrading to paid, then you need to figure out what are the words that you can use to cause them to upgrade, and use that as almost like an experiment, a marketing experiment that you could then use when you launch publicly, when you launch the big update. I always love to treat marketing like I treat engineering, that it's an iterative improvement process with experiments and hypotheses that I would then use to kind of tune and tweak the marketing. sometimes like the best marketing messages for launches actually come from your users. Like I write down actual sentences that users say, and then I just repeat them to other users and see if it clicks. Because oftentimes, like, again, they're the people who have the problem or who use the app or whatever. And when they start using it, they get excited, and they may actually share words that you could then use to get other people excited as well. Here we go. Wellin asks, we empower yoga teachers to do events at your local home. I remember that from last week. We've quickly grown, forcing us to waitlist new instructors. Should we hire more to expand our current city, expand to a new city with a new MVP, or talk to investors to enable us to build an MVP into a platform? So that's great. Congratulations on getting a backlog of new instructors. We've seen this a number of times with kind of these local startups. Let's identify the three camps. The first is grow in your existing city. The second is expand to a new city. The third is get investor dollars to improve your platform. I think the answer is A. It sounds like you already have a backlog, presumably in that first city that you're launching in. I would continue to work in that city because it's much easier to build an MVP with one location than to build an MVP that's live at all these different locations for a couple things. One is like usually you perfect it at one location and then copy and paste it into another location. It's very hard to like improve the product if you have two different locations or more live at the same time. Adora has a lot of things to say.
Yes, she does.
One of the partners at YC who started Homejoy. And then the third one, talking to investors. Like if you can help it, try to get money from your actual customers to fund your business rather than trying to rely on investor dollars. I know that sounds weird as an investor.
It'll make fundraising so much easier in the future, though.
I mean, the trick to fundraising is to not need money from investors. Then investors love to invest at that point. Okay, I think we can take two more questions. We're Cirrus, a platform for pre-operative teleconsultations to prepare patients for surgery from home. My question is, how to launch fast in the healthcare vertical when you have some legal or ethical discussions for telemedicine in your region? Okay, so launching fast, breaking things is usually a good sign. Probably not in medicine.
Yes.
Not in healthcare. We definitely don't recommend that
Not if there are
strategy.
legal or ethical implications, especially.
What I would consider doing here is thinking about your product as an evolution or an extension of the other products that are already on the market. So in your market, if there are telemedicine or teleconsultation products already there, then maybe one thing to do is to approach those apps and say, hey, I would like to add on a module that is specifically around pre-op teleconsultations. Could we use your app to do that? In the US, there are a few HIPAA compliant apps that are kind of like platforms that you can use. I think like you could probably try going to them and seeing if you could like use their entire tech stack and just copy and paste it into your application if you're worried about HIPAA and that kind of stuff, which you should be. Again, kind of like to the last point, focus on one region here so that you're not like balancing the ethical and legal ramifications in a bunch of different regions. But I think that sounds like what you're doing already. Okay. Thyssen is an audio-to-text platform that transcribes speaker sessions at conferences in real time to make them more accessible. Cool, got it. Question. Eric, mentioned that pursuing large customers might be the best. I don't know if I'm... Okay, so the question is like, pursuing large customers, is that good for startups? Actually, it's probably not always the best for startups. Here's another part of the question. However, if a person pursues larger customers, they have lower probability of converting and longer sales cycle. Isn't there an opportunity cost to not trying to spend time to convert smaller customers? Yes. The answer is that's exactly the problem. I'm not sure where I said that pursuing large customers is great, but I might have misspoke. Honestly, as we mentioned before, for the answer to another question, trying to get smaller customers who can make a decision quicker to buy or use your product is generally better, especially as you're iterating to product market fit in the early days. Yeah.
Waiting for those big customers might kill you.
Exactly. Cool. On that note, we're going to end this week's live Q&A. Thank you very much for asking all those questions. Keep them coming on Twitter and on the forums. We will have another session next week. Actually, next week's session is going to be live design reviews with Aaron Epstein. So if you want to have an amazing designer review your landing page or website, look out for the forum thread on Monday. Just post your website in the forum, and we will do a live review where we will look at your web page and talk about what we see as we do this next week. It's going to be an extra long session, 2 hours, so we will have, I think, more than enough time to cover a lot of sites. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thanks.